All right, coming up we have Special Agent Pete Lapp. Pete Lapp joined the FBI as a special agent in 1998. Correct me if I lie on anything. He did have an impressive career in counterintelligence and counterespionage, which led into previous roles: the supervisory special agent in counterintelligence division, counterespionage section, the unit chief of the PRC East Asia Espionage Unit, and was detailed to the ODNI senior advisor as the senior advisor for Homeland Security and Partner Engagement. Currently, he's the unit chief of the Active Shooter Unit, Office of Partner Engagement. Quite frankly, I hope this is a topic that you never actually need to know, but this presentation is very, very important. And so, Special Agent Lapp, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So thanks for having me. I was in the green room, which is kind of cool. There's pictures of all people that I didn't recognize for the most part. I'm assuming they're important. And one of them was Bono. So that's kind of cool. I'm wondering if maybe we shared a green room, 10, 12 years apart. I was in the same green room as Bono. So I grew up on U2, and I know they're kind of old in the tooth and been around for a long, long time, but that's kind of cool for me. Let me tell you just a little bit more about my background, because I think it puts some things in perspective about what we're going to talk about for about an hour. Prior to coming in the FBI, I was a police officer outside of Philadelphia for about 5 years, from 1994 until 1998 when I started in the FBI. Active shooters is more of a law enforcement term. I know when these events have occurred, the media kind of takes it and runs with it, and to be frank, it's more of a way of law enforcement to respond to these types of events. In the past, and I'm talking a lot before 1999, I think Columbine was a watershed moment for law enforcement in terms of how are we responding to these events. In the past, we would respond as cops to the call of shots fired at a mall, a building, a church, a house, if you will. And our law enforcement's response was to kind of surround the building. If someone was coming out, try and get them out easily, quickly, but we would surround the building, whether it was a bank, a mall, a movie theater, school, whatever. And the person would have become trapped. They probably had hostages, whether it's family or whether it's a bank, because they robbed a bank and all of a sudden the cops showed up and now they're stuck in there. And the idea was for law enforcement to call the SWAT team and to call the negotiators and try and resolve the situation peacefully if possible, but tactically if they had to. And we always kind of had this perception that you could negotiate your way out of the situation, because if someone goes in and robs a bank and they've got hostages all of a sudden, now there's a demand and there's a way of negotiating this peacefully, hopefully. Or if a guy mostly takes his family hostage, we could negotiate our way through or tactically kind of respond to this. And what some of these events over the years have taught us, unfortunately the hard way, law enforcement, is that there are certain folks that go into buildings that you cannot negotiate with. There is no demand that they have that you can try and resolve peacefully. Law enforcement had to change its response and had to go in towards the sound of gunfire to help save lives that were being lost as we spoke, kind of thing. So when I talk about active shooters, the perspective was changing law enforcement's response to this. And I know for today, there are probably similar type of guy robs a bank, gets stuck in a bank, police respond the same way, but this is just a different way of law enforcement responding, and it's been a change in paradigm, if you will, for how state and local folks respond. The FBI doesn't respond to these, as the call goes out. We might be called in afterwards, but at the same time, this is more of a, how do we change cops' perspective on, you need to go into the school with 2 or 3 people that you may never have worked for or with before. I would often work overtime shifts with different people who I knew, but I didn't work on a shift with, and therefore I don't know tactically if they would go left and I would go right. If they're, we didn't have that kind of bond, if you will. Sometimes you might work a shift with people you've never met before, in some of the bigger police departments. So what we did was we trained law enforcement a little better on how to respond to these things and how to get into the building more quickly and resolve them, if possible, tactically, because that was really what was happening. After Sandy Hook, the FBI did a study. President Obama directed the federal government, and by that I mean the Department of Justice, the FBI, Health and Human Services, Department of Education, and components of his White House to say, we need to study why this is occurring, with the goal of trying to prevent it if possible. But this is a phenomenon that keeps occurring. Let's understand it more clearly. The FBI commissioned a study, and I know this is kind of boring because I'm going to give you statistics. What I want to kind of drive home something. My challenge with these presentations is to give you enough information to have a concern about someday you might be involved in an active shooter situation, but not to create a paranoia. I don't want you going through the rest of your life going, if I go to the mall, I'm going to be involved in an active shooter incident. It's just a matter of time. If I go to a house of worship, like what happened in Charleston, we all thought, can't even go and pray without being worried about being shot and killed. It's just a matter of time before an active shooter comes into my synagogue, my place of worship, my whatever. These are high impact events and low probability. We have a country of 325 million people. Okay? Last year, the flu killed 80,000 people. The flu. Active shooter-wise, I don't know the statistic for last year, but I'm going to give you the numbers over the course of 15, 16, 17 years. And you're going to see that in 17 years, we haven't lost 80,000 people to an active shooter incident. Okay? Again, these are high impact and low probability events. But we should be familiar with some of the statistics because I think they drive home a couple important points. And also we should know how to respond to these and react to these if we, God forbid, find ourselves in a situation where we have to now run, hide, or fight, which is how the preaching, what we're telling you about how to respond. So next slide, please. This is how we define an active shooter incident. Generally speaking, it's not a mass shooting because there are active shooter incidents wherein no one was killed. Where we, law enforcement, or we, the public, intercepted the threat before they were able to kill. So it was an active shooter incident per se, but not a mass killing. And when we looked at the statistics overall, especially for those first 13 years, because the study that the FBI did initially was from 2000 to 2013, 160 incidents, and the average was 2 killed and 2 wounded in those first 13 years. Okay, so this is how we define an active shooter incident. The purpose being, for our study, we wanted to make sure that we eliminated domestic violence situations. Okay, and I know that's why primarily you all are here. We eliminated violent crime situations, like on a drug corner where there's a shooting. Okay, it's not an active shooter incident per se. We wanted to eliminate those types of incidents where it was going to kind of skew and be hard for us to track moving forward in the future. Not to say that a domestic situation might start an active shooter type scenario. For example, Sandy Hook. The kid who did the Sandy Hook started by going to his mother's house and killing his mother first, which I would define as a domestic incident, and then went to her school and killed more people at the school that she taught at. So not to say that it couldn't be a domestic incident, but we're not looking at necessarily a husband killing a wife in the home, more so going to a place of work, place of business, or what have you. Next slide, please. This is the amount of incidents that have occurred since we started looking at them in 2000. We went back as far as 2000. Quite frankly, I don't know why we started at 2000 versus 1999 versus 1998, but we started to start tracking the numbers in 2013 going back to 2000. You'll see here we've quantified there having been 250 active shooter incidents in that 17-year period. That averages out. I won't make you do the math. I've done the math on the ride over here. It's almost 14 per year nationwide. Okay? You see where the numbers are kind of all over the place in terms of per year. Like in 2010, we had a spike up to 26, and then in 2011, it drops down to 10. I will say that these numbers are a little bit higher than the average consistently, because the average, when you take 250 and divide it by 17, comes out to just under 14. But that's how we look at this nationwide per year. Next slide, please. Again, kind of going back to my flu anomaly, or flu analogy. 80,000 people last year were killed because of the flu. In total, in 17 years, we've had 800 people killed. That's bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to mitigate their lives. I'm not trying to minimize how hard that is for their families and friends and all that. I'm trying to put this in perspective in terms of making my point: high impact, low probability. The likelihood that you're going to go to your place of worship and be shot because of an active shooter, you're more likely to pick up some germs at your house of worship, at your favorite movie theater, at your favorite mall, than you are to be a victim of an active shooter incident. This, obviously, the Vegas shooting, which just hit the anniversary, was the highest, all told. I've actually seen a picture, which I don't want to put in the PowerPoint because I think it's pretty, it's hard. There's no, I try and sanitize what I put in display for the general public, because I think we cops can take a little more of that kind of stuff than the general public. But there's a picture from the Vegas shooter's hotel room, and it's the day after, and it's looking down on the field, and it's just unbelievable. I mean, it is just, you can't see anything graphic, but what you can see is just basically a shooting gallery. These folks were just a sitting duck. There was no place for them. There's no ability for them to fight. They had little opportunity to run, and there definitely was no place for them to hide in an open field, on a football field, so to speak, if you could picture that, at a concert. Okay, so this number is just, it's hard to grasp, but it's easy when you look at the situation from his perspective, how that many people could have been killed and wounded. Next slide, please. Where these are occurring, okay? This touches all of our lives when we leave the house, okay? None of these are inside your home, so to speak. All right, so places of worship. I know after Charleston there was this perception that you can't go to your place of worship and pray without being potentially a victim of an active shooter. Out of 250 incidents, all of 10 occurred in a place of worship. Statistically speaking, you are safe going to your place of worship to pray, all right? Commerce, places of open and closed commerce. That could mean your business, whether you work at like a Booz Allen or a General Dynamics, where you have guards and controlled entry and all that kind of stuff, or if you're talking about a movie theater or a mall or a pizzeria, okay? That number is probably the most statistically significant of where these are occurring, at places of business, whether open or closed, okay? Education, and I don't have the breakdown in this slide because I just got this slide yesterday. From 2000 to 2013, there were almost, I believe it was almost 25% of the 160 incidents in that time period that happened on academic campuses, whether it was K through 12 or higher education. Statistically, it was almost double the amount that occurred at K through 12. And at first I kind of was like, well, that's really hard to understand, because You would think a college student who's over the age of 18 can go legally buy a gun and therefore then snap, if you will, when he or she is on campus, and it's mostly he's. I apologize for our male members of the room, but to be honest with you, it's mostly men. Why were there more of these events occurring in K through 12 than at college? Well, I thought probably two reasons. Number one, a lot of stress that goes on in high school, a lot of bullying, a lot of that kind of stuff. And number two, most of your high schools and elementary schools are one structured campuses versus colleges that are a campus that have different buildings, whereas you would have to go like at Virginia Tech and go from building to building to building. There's more opportunity to kill more people at K through 12s because they're all in the same building, and they're not going to be armed, and they're not going to fight back, and therefore if you want to do this, unfortunately, there's an opportunity for you there versus on a college campus. But I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of how much. Questions on where this is occurring from a statistic perspective? Next slide, please. There's some things in here that I think are interesting, and I don't want to dwell on what we've already talked about. All but two were lone gunmen. You'll often see in the media coverage that the immediate media coverage, and I'm not trying to chastise the media because they're relying on real-time information, but there's always, almost always, reports of two gunmen. Statistically speaking, it's always a lone gunman. All but two of the original 160 incidents were lone gunmen. And that does not include Columbine, because Columbine was 1999, and our study started in 2000, okay? It's happening in most states in the United States, all but 10. Don't ask me what the 10 are, please. I don't know. I should, but I don't. It's not just happening on the coast. It's not just happening, it's happening all over the country. I think this is kind of relevant. 40% of the shooters are committing suicide before cops are even getting there. Okay? That tells me, and what I'm telling you, is that you need to be prepared to fight or do something before the police even get there. Okay? And that's kind of important. I was surprised that at least 5 remain at large from those original. Now, I haven't followed up to see if they've been arrested, but 5 of the original 160, when we completed the study in 2013, they were still on the loose. Next slide, please. 2016 to 2017, I thought this was impressive. In 10 of the 50, unarmed and armed citizens kind of stood up and did something. I thought that was pretty impressive. And I think what we're seeing is our training of local law enforcement, state and local law enforcement, getting better because we're seeing the cops responding right away and taking the first 3 or 4 folks that get there, first cops that get there and say, okay, I'm 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, we're going in. I've never worked with you before. You and I, we work all the time together. We're not SWAT people. We're just regular street patrol officers, but we're going to go in and tactically try and eliminate the threat, stop the threat. I, as a street officer for 5 years, never got tactical training. I'll be honest with you, I was not special. I didn't go to any specialized training to learn how to clear rooms and all that kind of stuff. And part of what we're learning is we need to teach cops better how to go in more tactically, quickly. And I think we're seeing positive results from that happening, that training. Next slide, please. I'm going to show about a 6-minute video. It's the first of 3 videos I'm going to show. This is a run, hide, fight video. The FBI preaches run, hide, fight as a way to survive these incidents. We did not come up with this. This came from the city of Houston, but we've adopted it and given it the FBI's good housekeeping seal of approval, for lack of a better way of describing it. I like run, hide, fight because it's simple to remember. It's see, spot, run, easy. Stop, drop, roll, kind of easy to remember. Here's the difference. With stop, drop, and roll, first you stop, then you drop, and then you roll. You don't roll first, and then stop, and then drop. Or you don't drop, then roll, and stop. In run, hide, fight, it is situational. Before you've had a chance to run, in a room like this where there's no place to hide, your only option might be to fight. And that might be the first thing that you're able to do depending on the circumstance. So you can't think, first I run, then I hide, and then I fight, because you might be able to hide first and run, and then you might be looking for anything you might get your hands on to fight if in the event that's the last thing that you are able to do. So let's watch the video. I will say I did this for an audience one time, and I've done this for many, many audiences. I actually had one person come up to me who was very upset. I didn't warn her that this was a dramatization. There's a person who shot in this, and all 10 takes that they did of this shooting, the person came back to life. So it's just a dramatization. No one was killed as a result of making this video. So I just want to put that caveat out there. It's just a training video. So go ahead, please.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference: run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Everybody okay with that? Questions, thoughts on that? One of the points I want to drive home on Run, Hide, Fight is 2 points, but let me talk about law enforcement and how they're going to treat you and handle you during one of these incidents. I'm not going to say they're going to be bad cop, worse cop, but they're not going to be officer friendly. It's not going to be, ma'am, can I see your hands? They're going to be pretty high adrenaline. They're going to assume that you're the shooter until they can figure out that you're not. Yes, you might have obvious wounds. You could be distraught. And cops are not going to really care until they feel comfortable with the fact that you or the 10 people that you're with are not the shooter. Okay, so understand you need to really listen to what they're saying and appreciate that they're not in the best of friendliest of terms at that point in time. In large part because we've got 5 of those 160 that are on the loose. The guy at Parkland left the school and was out and about for 2 or 3 hours maybe in the public till law enforcement found him. So that's their concern at that point in time, not being the nice, friendly community policing officer that they could be. This video, the Run, Hide, Fight video, by the way, is on YouTube. You can find it online. This video is from the shooting and the terrorist attack in Paris, which is now, I think, 2 years old. There is no one dies in the video, and you're not going to see anyone shot. Okay, but you will see real people in a real situation either run or hide, and I want you to watch them reevaluate their initial response, because this is not a dramatization. This is the real deal. This is a Saturday night. I think it occurred on a Saturday night. Folks in Paris sitting on the sidewalk in Paris, having some wine, eating a nice dinner, and then all of a sudden this happens. So you're going to see their real reaction to a real situation. And I think, I often run this twice, but I don't know, it's only about 3.5 minutes, but let's just see. I don't want to talk through the first one, because I want you to watch and come to your own conclusions and watch what they do when they think, because you can actually watch them think about their initial reactions. So go ahead, please. There is no audio to this, by the way. The circle is the shooter, by the way. Okay. We can go back. We'll watch it real slow. I should have told you that that's the same cafe, 3 different angles. Let me give you my, if we can just pause it real quick. So I don't want to, I'm not criticizing any of these folks. I've never been in this situation, either as a cop or as just a civilian. I'm not criticizing their reactions. What I'm trying to do is point out things that I see, that hopefully you're seeing, and give you perspective about maybe how it could have reacted differently. Because all these folks are alive. And at the end of the day, right, that's the most important thing. But there's a good chance the way they reacted, some of them reacted, they wouldn't be alive. So let's just kind of go through this and let me give you my observations. The red circle is the shooter. Go ahead, you can start that, please. You see shots fired, and you see people come in. One goes in front of the bar, the other person goes behind the bar. Okay, the bar is going to provide you both cover and concealment. From the sidewalk, I can't see who's behind the bar. That's concealment. And from the sidewalk, and even from in the bar, in the cafe, I probably can't shoot through the bar. It provides cover. But you see someone, they go off the sidewalk, one jumps behind the bar, one jumps in front of the bar, and then she pretty quickly goes, yeah, this is not as good as it could be, let me go upstairs. You see a bunch of people in the cafe get underneath of the tables. Is that cover or is that concealment? It's not cover. It's concealment. Because you can maybe, if the gunman doesn't come in the cafe, if he's looking in through the windows, maybe he can't see underneath this. But if he could shoot through it. That table is not going to provide you cover. And they sat under that table for a long, long time. Had the gunman come in to the cafe, like the gunman came in at Columbine, they would have shot and killed the people underneath those tables, just like the kids at Columbine were killed, because they hid underneath the tables as opposed to running out the back exit. This bar will be able to provide you cover and concealment. Like when you see the cops behind, on the outside of the car, behind the engine, that's because they can't be seen, which provides them concealment, and that engine block provides cover from bullets going through. Now, was it better to go upstairs versus downstairs? I don't know. Downstairs, I'm sure there's an exit, a back exit. I don't know for sure, but I'm predicting they have a way of getting supplies in through the basement as opposed to the front door of the cafe. There's probably at least a bat downstairs, maybe a bottle of wine or two that if all I have to fight with and I'm fighting for my last breath, I've got a bottle of wine, I'll take it, pop it, take a swig, and then go after the guy with it and throw it at him, something, I don't know. So this is the manager. Obviously, he comes in a little nonchalant. It's the Paris way, it's the French way, just kind of coming in. But you can see all these people underneath these tables now coming out from their concealment, grabbing their bags, grabbing their purses, grabbing their coats. And then their manager is taking them downstairs, which probably is safer, and there's an ability to hide or maybe run and get to safety. I noticed initially when you see the circle, there were people that were underneath the table. I don't know why they weren't killed. I don't know if the gun misfired. I don't know if he shot and missed. It certainly seemed like he shot at them. That's probably that thing that you can't teach called divine intervention. I don't know why they're not dead. But when they did, he left, they ran in the direction he was going to. I don't know if that was the best option, but it's the option they chose. This too is online. You can find this on YouTube. I think it's powerful because it shows real people in a real incident reacting in a real way. And I think there's value in kind of seeing how some folks react and how some folks didn't, and deciding. There are going to be long pauses. There are going to be pauses in between the gunfire, okay? We've seen through these incidents that shooters don't come in and just shoot up a room and then stop and kill themselves. The shooting at the Navy Yard down the street, probably not even a mile or two from here, went on for about 45 minutes maybe. So there were long pauses where the shooter was shooting and then going to another place and looking for more people to shoot. Those pauses in gunfire, I feel, are opportunities. They're moments for you to reevaluate. I ran, and did I run far enough? Or I hid, and now do I have an opportunity to run? Or I need to find out what's here that I have that I can fight with. And maybe all it is that microphone stand. I don't know. But that's a heck of a lot better than that flower pot. If I'm going to fight, I'd rather have a microphone stand than a flower pot, right? Because this is all I have in this room right here, right now. God forbid something happened, okay? Next slide, please. So the Virginia Tech shooting. Video we're going to watch is a victim. It's about 3.5 minutes. Christina Anderson. I don't know if you've heard her speak before. She's a dynamic, awesome speaker. She's actually become a friend of mine. There's an iconic photo from Virginia Tech where the police are dragging this poor young girl, and her pants are falling down. And she kind of makes a joke about it in her presentation. She was shot 3 times in the room, and she's going to talk about what was going through her mind at the time. And I think it's really, really, she's a powerful speaker. I've never heard anyone speak in front of an audience and drop the F-bomb as much as she does and get away with it. And she gets people actually emotional, because she herself gets emotional because she survived this. So just going to watch this real quick.
We heard the first shots at around 9:40 a.m. I was sitting on the wall of the classroom, so in the hallway, and I could hear the shots getting closer and closer very quickly. I mean, there was only a few seconds between the first time we heard them and when he actually walked in. To me, it sounded like an axe being taken to a piece of wood. And our teacher, she opened the door, and she peered outside, and she immediately shut the door, and she said, "Call 911." And right then, he walked in just seconds after. There's absolutely no time to think or to duck or to take cover, and people just kind of fell to the floor. And he immediately walked in shooting, and he went to the other side of the classroom, and he started going down the rows. He went down each row very quickly, very purposefully. And I remember thinking, your turn is coming. You're going to get shot. I mean, I didn't realize there was an active shooter, but I knew something bad was happening. He came back to our classroom 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he killed himself in the front of the class. In between each time he was there, you could just hear people crying and coughing, and the cell phone started ringing. When he was in our class, I remember trying not to breathe very much, so he couldn't tell I was alive. Because as my stomach was hitting the chair, I was thinking, you know, he can see me breathing, he can see me alive, and that was very scary. I'll never forget when the SWAT team first broke in at around 9:51. The officer in the front of the classroom said, "We have a lot of blacks in here." And at the time, I couldn't comprehend what he was talking about, but he meant triage codes. And I remember looking to the girl to my right and realizing, you know, what black meant. He looked over me and he said, first he said yellow, and then he changed it immediately and he said red. And that's when I first started panicking. I still couldn't speak. I was shot 3 times, lying on my back, and I remember thinking, what do you see? Like, what can you see on me that I can't, that you would change me from yellow to red? He killed 12 people in my classroom, including our teacher. Your perspective on life and your attitude and your relationships definitely changes after you experience something like this. I noticed very quickly after the shooting, just my outlook on things, my behaviors, my attitudes, what I valued really shifted and has changed dramatically. You're much more grateful for small things in life. You look at people differently. You appreciate traffic a little bit more because at the end of the day, you get to be there. You get to experience traffic. You get to feel, you know, the frustration of being alive, and that's something that we can never forget to not take for granted.
I often get asked about playing dead versus not playing dead. I'm sure there are folks that have played dead that have then got up and walked away. I think she was trying to. I've not heard of stories where people played dead and then were dead, became dead because And I think down in Orlando, I think the shooter went back and tried to then make sure that if he didn't get you the first time, he was trying to get you again. As it seemed like, I mean, she was shot 3 times. And I think that he was probably in that same mindset. So I can't tell you you should run first, or you should hide, or you should play dead or not play dead, because I just don't know. I can't give you that satisfaction that should be your first answer. If you have every opportunity, though, I think running is the best. But I can't tell you that you're not going to run into the shooter. That is a possibility. Folks that were escaping from the Navy Yard, we have CCTV camera coverage. MPD did a fantastic job of piecing together from the moment he went to Home Depot and bought his first thing for the shooting to the moment where I think he took his own life. All the video, every time he crossed in front of a camera, whether it was at the register, at the gun place, wherever, and put all this together. And he was in the stairwells, and if people were running and met him in the stairwells, they would have been dead. Versus if they hide. So there's no unfortunately some magic to this in terms of run, hiding, or fighting. Okay. What I do want to tell you is that if you're fighting for your life. Okay. The folks at Fort Hood. The soldiers that were at Fort Hood during that event were unarmed soldiers, Army soldiers, who ran to the sound of gunfire unarmed, because that's what their training taught them to do, and that's what happened. I'm not telling you, go run to the sound of gunfire, you unarmed middle-aged woman who has a purse. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you fight because you're about to probably die. And you have to now fight for your life. And whether it's with that microphone stand or all if you have is that flower pot or that chair, that's all you got. And you're fighting for your life at that point in time. Next slide, please. So we did study the initial 160 shooters and came up with some. It's very hard to generalize 160 people in terms of why and what they did and come up with any kind of magic formula. If you see this, that person's going to go off and attack. But there are some things that we did observe that you can maybe see as indicators. Obviously, someone buying multiple weapons in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go off and start doing this. Just because someone's going through a divorce, going through a hard time, doesn't mean they're going to go do this, obviously. We have millions and millions of divorces in this country every year. We don't have millions of these incidents, thank God. But these are some of the things that could be clues. Okay, these are some of the things that could be clues. Next slide, please. Definitely a personal grievance. I will tell you, at Vegas, we do not have a motive. We still do not have a motive for why he went in and attacked people at a concert and killed 58 people and wounded 540 others. We don't have a reason why. We don't have a letter. We don't have a clear motive. And we may never, to be honest with you, and that might be the hard part. But we do see people that have personal grievances, that have some kind of significant traumatic event in their life, like a divorce is, like the loss of a child is, like losing a job. We had an individual in 1996, so before the study, he resigned from a company. Wasn't fired, he resigned. And 6 years later, he came back to that same company and went to the visitor center, because he was no longer an employee, and shot and killed 3, 4, 5 people. It would have been considered an active shooter incident. He wasn't fired, he wasn't downsized, he wasn't walked out, he quit. No idea why he went into his former place of employment, but something happened where he had something in his life and then went to where he knew. But it had nothing to do, seemingly, with the people that he worked with, because it was such a long period of time. I know this is cliche at this point in time, and I have to point out that in Parkland, obviously, there was information that was provided to the FBI that didn't get acted on. If you do see something, please say something. And whether you report it to your local police department, or whether you report it to the FBI, or whether you report it to both, okay, report it multiple times. Don't worry about being that nuisance. I do think that saying something, because we're going to handle it pretty discreetly. We're not going to just all of a sudden go arrest somebody because the next door neighbor said, hey, I got this weird feeling about this guy. This is what happened. This is the interaction. Or I see him buying all these weapons. You know, those little things, please tell law enforcement. We're going to handle it discreetly. We really are. And I think that we're going to definitely be more aggressive in trying to figure out if this person's doing something that's normal or whether they're planning something like another Parkland, another Virginia Tech, another, unfortunately, fill in the blank. Next slide, please. There is a study out. It's rather long and lengthy. It talks about some of these different behaviors. I wish I could say there's 1, 2, or 3 behaviors that you should key in on, and that's your predictor. The problem with this study, it's 130 pages. It's really long. I don't know that there's a single magic formula, to be frank, about predicting these folks. Okay. Next slide. Questions, comments, thoughts, observations. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I really appreciate, first of all, I am one of those people who appreciate statistics, so I appreciate the statistics you provided on the frequency of these types of active shooter incidents. But given the subject of this conference as well, I'd love to hear if you could speak to the presence of gun violence and shooting within the home and by domestic partners.
In what way? In the connection with an active shooter type situation, or, because I know that's prominent, and I dealt a lot with domestic violence in my previous life as a police officer, but I'm not sure I understand the analogy that you're making for your question.
So, I would assume, and if you could validate this assumption, that the majority of gun violence does not happen in these types of mass shootings and a lot of media coverage, but the majority of gun violence does happen in conjunction with domestic disturbances. Would that be a correct assumption?
I don't know the statistics, but given my doing this for 25 years in both worlds, I would say, yeah, probably. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Say the same types of mechanisms would apply to those situations as well.
Yeah, I think they could. I do think they could, and I don't see why you couldn't use run, hide, fight, unfortunately, in your own family. Yeah, I don't know why you couldn't. The thing to keep in mind, I think, with the active shooter phenomenon, if you will, yeah, we showed the Paris situation because it's a training tool, and it did happen. This is a uniquely American problem. I mean, this is born in the USA, made in the USA. I mean, you do not see this level of violence around the world. And I don't make political statements from this podium about the Second Amendment and more guns, less guns, because that's not the FBI's role. I get asked that question, and so I'll just kind of spearhead it in terms of, if you're legally authorized to own a gun, then that's the law, and then you should be able to do that because that's your legal right. It's a uniquely American phenomenon. Yeah, we've had folks in different countries go after other people with guns, not to the extent that it happens here in the States. But to answer your question, I do think that you're more likely to become a victim of a gun in your own home, or in your home where you've had an estranged partner and there's that, domestic violence situation, than you would be if you go to the movie theater and go to a movie or whatever. Yes.
I have a son who just started kindergarten this year, and they are actually doing active shooter trainings at his school. They call them, I don't call it, but it's not, they don't call it active shooter.
Right.
But it's for obvious reasons.
Right.
And I don't want to have to check it for
Yeah.
But are there ways that you can prepare for these types of, I mean, when the first time he did it,
Yeah.
we're going to have, I think, 2 more over the course of the school year. How can we best prepare our kids to have that conversation?
That's a great question. I have 3 kids, 17, 14, and 12. My 14-year-old recently said, hey, Dad, we had had that same kind of, she's a freshman in high school, so we had, you can have that kind of level of discussion with her than a kindergartner. That's a great question. I am surprised that they did it in a way that was kind of traumatizing, and I think that's why a lot of school districts, and we law enforcement don't force ourselves when school districts say, no, you have to do this. This is their own decision to make. Sandy Hook being a big incident that actually, I think, has caused a lot of schools to reassess training and awareness and preparation. Use the statistics. I would go to the statistics and say, honey, yeah, but guess what? This is the truth. And share with them. I mean, you're going to start talking about life and death situations. I mean, you might have one of your parents may pass away, and they're going to have to deal with that. So I think that possibly I find comfort in the statistics. I really do, because we become stigmatized when an event occurs because of the coverage. And if you go back to the stats, you can go, wow, it is high impact and low probability.
Well, kindergarten, I would think that would be too traumatizing for her. I would think that they would train the staff so that they could better prepare children
Right.
when something happens, as opposed to showing the child. That's a 5-year-old. I think it's
Yeah.
too young. But something else I wanted to ask you, okay, of course, Second Amendment right, I understand that they have the right to buy firearms, but when someone goes and purchases firearms, all of these ammunition, a red flag should go up with the person who's selling that equipment. I would think they would maybe alert, just be precaution, alert the authorities. Well, such and such just bought, of course this is right, but such and such person just purchased such and such ammunition. Is any of that enforced against these companies that sell firearms?
So what law enforcement is going to look at in terms of these types, and let's make an analogy in terms of, after 9/11, we would get a lot of calls for folks saying, okay, there's my neighbor is Muslim and they're out there praying and all this kind of stuff. Okay, these are constitutionally protected activities. Is there something else? Like, are they saying something that's causing you to, we can't just open up investigations on constitutionally protected things. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of the bear arms, all these things, religion. We can't just we law enforcement. Okay, you could be concerned, that's fine, and you can give us that information, but at the same time, and what else? Well, he hasn't showered in a while. He's looking disheveled. This guy used to be really together, and he's home all the time now, and he's disheveled. That's something, okay? That's something that says maybe there's something wrong. He's got fired from a job, and he went out and bought all these weapons, and he's looking like there's some issue going on because he's changed his demeanor. That's something that we can work with, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's not just going out and buying 20 guns at one time. I mean, it's constitutionally protected.
When you were saying the see something, say something.
Yes.
And you're I think it's in reference to an active shooter, so like if you notice a neighbor. But I think for the domestic violence realm, like she was saying, if it's a spouse noticing whose behavior changes or the target practice.
Yep.
And they report it to the police, their hands are really tied. I mean, the police's hands are really tied. I have 3 cases right now, and there's a lot of, the statistics show
Yep.
Asian women like would be killed. They have like all the red flags, but the police are like, what do you want us to do?
I know. I mean, the protection from abuse.
Now,
Yep.
if there's more digging that the person should be doing to document, to say, like the magic word that will get the police department to understand the fear.
There's no magic word. I mean, there's a totality of circumstances. We look at these in terms of totality of circumstances. The protection from abuse, in my experience as a cop, the protection from abuse orders, they're worth as much as a piece of paper. They are not going to save a woman or a man's life, unfortunately. They are just legally saying you will separate from this person physically, and if you do violate that, you're going to go to jail, potentially, but you violate it and you killed it, it's not going to protect somebody. So that's a difficult question. I don't.
The issue, as you said, it's not that the police don't understand the fear or don't understand the things that she's expressing. She's saying, he does this and this, it caused me to fear, and now he's acting differently. That, like you said, the hands are tied in that we don't have any approach that's not enforcing the law. Unfortunately, protection from abuse or a stay-away order or a temporary protection order, it can be enforced, but unless it's violated, it doesn't do anything. So, unfortunately, that's the way it is with all those things. That if he's doing 12 things that are causing her to fear, but none of them are against the law, unfortunately, like you said, the hands really are tied. Even if there was a magic word, if it's not against the law, then there's nothing the police can specifically do. There's a lot of other resources that we can turn the person on to, which I'm guessing is where you're coming from or other people in this room. But unfortunately, the police are limited in that their response to violations of the law.
Yeah, we have our limitations, and I mean, I can tell you, the one case I had as a cop of domestic violence, the woman shot her husband. There had been a history of violence of him on her, but when we got called, she was drunk. She shot him at the top of the stairs. She actually shot him in the groin area, and I mean, she made full confessions, to me. We arrested her for attempted homicide. The next day I went to the hospital to interview him. He didn't say a word. You're the victim. What happened? I don't know. This guy was a bad dude anyway. But I mean, my point is a lot of folks go back to that relationship and they don't leave at the first hint. They kind of go back and everything's fine, everything, and there's that cycle, if you will, and it's hard for us in law enforcement to prevent. It's hard for you all as social workers to prevent, I'm sure. So I don't know that I have a great answer for you, to be honest with you. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for your time. Thanks for what you do, because I know when I did his job, I really appreciated the work that you all did, because there were a lot of situations, delicate situations, that I didn't have the right words for, and I come in looking like me and my cop thing stuff, and you folks really, really helped me in what I do, and I'm sure that you help all of us. So thank you, because you probably don't get nearly enough credit. You're part of the team, and we really appreciate you folks. You got free beer anytime we go out, and it's on him, but I mean, free beer anytime, or wine, whatever you want to drink, it's fine, it's all good. So thanks for your time, and hope you have a good rest of your trip.
Pete, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do want to thank Pete, our Special Agent Lapp, for coming out and talking to you guys. Because I would say that this is something that's very relevant to what you do. The question came up previously, and I would pretend like I'm smarter than Agent Lapp, but I'm not. But I do have Google on my phone, DuckDuckGo actually. But so what I did look up there's some statistics, a definite connection between active shooters and domestic violence through FBI data. Through 2009 and 2016, for example, 57% of active shooter scenarios involved a spouse, relative, or other type of connection. 16% of active shooters did have a previous conviction or arrest for domestic violence. And 74% of domestic violence situations have spilled into the workplace in some form or another. Maybe not deadly, maybe not in the form of a shooting, but in some form or another. So most certainly, the workplace is a location where domestic violence can be a factor, and most certainly the work that you guys do can be impacted by domestic violence and violence in general. So, Agent Lapp, thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you, Google.
Yes.